Welcome to Season 2 of the Color Success Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie J. Wong. Stephanie Jae Park is a New York City-based actor-singer. She plays Eliza in the Philip National Tour of Hamilton, which will resume when theaters open again. She was in the original Broadway cast of King and I, Tuptim, understudy, featured dancer, Lincoln Center, and War Paint, Nederlander Theatre. For more credits, pictures, check out her website at www.stephaniejpark.com. When she's not on stage, Stephanie is a songwriter with an upcoming EP in summer/fall of 2021. She is also a vocal coach and a member of Range Music NYC. She holds a BFA from University of Cincinnati's College-Conservatory of Music. Stephanie is a proud member of AEA and SAG-AFTRA. Her Instagram is Stephanie Slay Park. Thank you so much, Steph, for joining me today.
Thank you, Steph, for letting me be here.
Absolutely. So what I find most interesting about you is that you have so many diverse talents, including yodeling. How did you select the skills you wanted to learn, and how does it apply to your career now?
Yeah, it's so funny because I don't know if I necessarily chose the skills growing up. I'm the youngest of three girls and a very musical family. And so when I was like 3 or 4 years old, I was like, Mom, please, I want to be in voice lesson just like my sisters. I want to take ballet just like them. And so when it came to my upbringing, I was trained very classically, both in opera and with ballet. And then I think when it comes to specifically yodeling, what's funny about that is it's basically I took what could be considered a weakness and turned it into a strength. So something people call it flipping when in music, when you're just flipping from one register to another.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a very strong soprano. As I said, my upbringing is very classical, and yet I grew up listening to a lot of pop, and so I had this very different belty kind of chest voice register. And I wasn't really able to mix them together, which is what a lot of musical theater people do. They call it a mix specifically, and it's that very pingy placement. I've had trouble with it my whole life. And so what I do instead is just accentuate the difference between the chest and the soprano, and that ends up being a yodel, and that ends up being a flip. But yeah, I think I have a lot of different skill sets just that I just picked up out of interest. I think I'm really interested in a lot of different art forms and different genres of music. And I think it's more just that I couldn't choose. These couple years, I'm going to focus on singing classically, or these couple years, I'm going to focus on jazz. And I think it's helped me because I have all these different skill sets that work with so many different shows, going from the earlier parts of my career, which is much more musical theater, classical, things like King and I or Cinderella, and then working really hard to get my pop voice more marketable, or just able to sing things from Hamilton, which is so contemporary and so different.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's just I acquired these skill sets because I was curious, and because I couldn't choose a single one. I was never completely satisfied with one, and it helped because it expands the amount of shows and projects that I'm able to do because of it.
Absolutely. And I mean, for those who aren't musically talented or studied, I think it's important to note that your voice is just beautiful. I mean, I've checked out your stuff, and it's amazing. So keep yodeling. I think that there are a lot of great projects ahead of you, as well as the ones you've already been a part of. Well, you have been a part of quite a few projects. I mean, even in the intro, that shows a lot of talent and people believing in you. What have been your favorite projects, and how has that helped you learn about yourself and your growth?
Yeah, I have to admit my favorite project is my most recent one, which is Hamilton. And before I played Eliza, I actually spent a year being the standby. So the principal standby basically is off stage, and then whenever one of the main characters, basically one of the Schuyler sisters, was out of the show, I would play that role for that night or that performance. And so I had to cover all three Schuyler sisters, Angelica, Eliza, yeah, and Peggy. And I think what was so great about that experience is that I never, ever, ever thought I would ever play Angelica, ever. I got the callback material and I called my manager after I looked at the music and I was like, there's no way I could sing this. Like, what are you thinking? And he was like, okay, just take a voice lesson and just try it, just try it. And so I think what I've learned from shows, especially like Hamilton, is like, there's so much more to me than I limit myself to. Like I always thought of myself as a soprano, as an ingenue, as, this, and that. And I'm definitely more than that. So just kind of I've learned to give myself a lot more credit, I guess. And through the doing of it. Yeah.
So there's no getting around your Korean American. So
100% Korean.
Yeah. What is the significance of being an Asian American woman playing Eliza on the tour?
Yeah, I mean, it means so much to me. I just wish that I grew up seeing more Asian Americans in media overall. I wish that I saw like an Asian Belle in Beauty and the Beast, or like an Asian, just roles that are not written for Asian people being played by Asian people would have been so wonderful growing up, because I really limited myself until pretty recently, until the last couple years. I always thought I had to play an Asian role or else it's just not for me. And so I feel a huge responsibility, I think, and an honor to kind of represent for my people. And while I was playing it in Toronto, there's a pretty large Asian population there. And at the stage door every single night, there's so many people telling me how much it meant to them to see a full Asian woman playing it on stage. And representation matters. It really, 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 really matters. And it's hard to understand that unless you are a minority who doesn't see yourself represented all the time in media. So I just feel honored. I feel really lucky, and I want to do it well, not just for me and not just for the character, but for who I represent, truly.
Absolutely. You're changing the game by playing this role. And my story about Hamilton is I got to see the show in San Francisco.
Oh, cool.
The day before they shut down.
Oh my God.
Yeah, it was awesome. But I kept like applying for the lottery, and then that day I finally won it, and the next day they shut down the theater because of the pandemic. And so I was really lucky to see that. And then with my family, we watched it on Disney and everything. So, but they loved it, and especially since my daughters are fairly young, it was great to expose them to something so diverse, something so beautiful. So hopefully you put out like a recorded version of the play once it's all said and done, so we can also see you. And I think one of the tour stops, was it in Fresno when it resumes, or?
I'm not sure. There's a lot of different companies, so there's a lot of places we're supposed to go, but we'll see how it goes. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that we open in the fall or something, but we don't have any dates confirmed.
So how do you get yourself in the mindset to play different characters? Because you're saying you had to cover 3 roles, and so how do you mentally prepare yourself for those various roles?
Yeah, that's a great question. Basically, I use this acting technique of Meisner, and I learned from this incredible woman named Laura Henry. She's my acting teacher, but there's a lot of homework. I have like pages and pages of work done on every single character, with her relationships with her sisters, with Hamilton, and all her circumstances, what happened before the scene. And so for every different scene, I have like, this is the circumstance, this is what happened right before the scene takes place, and this is my objective, and these are my relationships. And I just have that like little cheat sheet, and all these things have to be something that kind of like gets me in my heart, gets me in my core, and then you just kind of snap into it and you just do it. And it's like, especially playing Eliza, which I don't want to spoil it, although I think most people know, but it's quite a traumatic story that she goes through, and I don't feel like I'm doing it justice unless I feel these things fully. And at first I was really nervous about that. I was like, I don't want to experience this trauma 8 times a week. I was like, this is exhausting. And I will say, like, emotionally speaking, she is definitely the most exhausting role out of the 3. But there's this whole, like, I clear my energy right after. I kind of do this like specific thing where I clear my center meridian. And Yeah, yeah. Every scene is just like a new, like a page turn. You have to kind of like mentally reset for everything. And I will say too that my sister's an energy worker, and a life coach actually. So every week I check in with her and she helps me kind of like work through any kind of blockage energetically or emotionally. So
How does she get the energy to move?
yeah, so she asks the subconscious mind. Energy is a lot about the subconscious. I don't know what the exact percentage is, but like 90% of your brain is subconscious. It remembers everything, it remembers every memory, every face. And so she does this thing called muscle testing, which is like, I think it's used a lot in kinesiology. Yeah. Where you kind of like ask your body yes or no questions. And she uses that to access your subconscious and ask, what trapped emotion do you have today, or what is blocking me from my best performance, for example. And she'll look through this chart of emotions, and once she lands on the correct emotion, for example, my body tells her, and then she's able to find, how many times has it been stuck, why, was there specific incidents, and can she release it, and then she releases it through that center meridian. So it's a whole practice. It's incredible. If you want to look her up, it's Free to Heal LLC. She's truly incredible. But there's a whole line of work with energy work, and I believe in it so strongly. I feel it. I feel its effects so strongly.
That's amazing. And I love exposing new techniques for people because
Yeah.
they're all complementary, and
Yes.
therapy is one, and
Yes.
there's so many different aspects to wellness and health.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned clearing the energy, but what barriers have you faced in your career and how have you dealt with them? And maybe now, how do you deal with things differently than maybe several years ago?
Yeah, I think I am my own biggest barrier. I am my own biggest critic, and that's pretty common with everyone. But I think there's a little bit of the Asian culture that it's like a little bit stronger in. We're really high achievers, really like kind of perfectionists sometimes, and that very thing it seems like it's good, but it's really bad. It's like being a perfectionist is really bad because it's another way of saying insecurity. Fear is like a mask for insecurity, and perfectionism is a mask for fear, I think. And so I think I've often had to very actively combat my inner critic. Like there are times like I have a really hard time listening to myself or watching myself, or everyone does, but when you're an artist and your product is you, it's like really hard to kind of separate those two things. And yeah, so I have to actively like list, these are three things that I like about my voice. I have to like, every time I hear it, I have to list what I like to combat the inner critic.
And
And I think like also not demonizing that critic at the same time, because in some ways it is my superpower. My ability to break down what I want to improve is also great, but it can't be in the driver's seat. So lately I've learned to put her in the back seat and not let her drive the car. Um, yeah, I think that's been like my biggest lesson.
that is a very acceptance and commitment therapy approach.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy that you mentioned that. And really, it's thinking beyond just what's going wrong, for instance, in your mind,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
really putting yourself as the driver of the bus, so to speak. And
Hmm.
I think it helps to be self-aware that someone's still in the back seat, kind of giving
Hmm.
you some play-by-play on the things that you've been doing. But it's really amazing that you're able to kind of see that as visualize it as well as verbalize it, because I think a lot of people can use that technique.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope so.
So, I mean, there's a lot of xenophobia, rise in Asian hate crimes.
Yeah.
And so I did want to touch upon how that has impacted you and impacted people around you, and kind of what your thoughts are on that.
It's just so heartbreaking. I can't understand all the hate. I can't understand why we can't look to each other and see how we're all pretty much the same. We all bleed the same. We all feel the same, and it's definitely hard to see people who look like me, or people especially who look like my grandma, or like my grandparents or my parents, being attacked. And I mean, just the short answer of it is it's just heartbreaking. I don't know what the solution is. I think like one thing that I think is helpful is just more exposure. We've kind of talked about representation before, but it's also just like exposing yourself to different cultures. I feel really lucky. I've traveled all around in my life. I've lived in so many different places. And so I have a lot of exposure to different demographics, to different cultures, races, everything. And so I feel lucky to look at someone and not see just their outer appearance and judge them based on that. But I think like people who maybe have lived in only one place their whole life, or only are exposed to one kind of person, maybe just like follow more people of color, or like just follow more, and it's not even a chore. It's not even like out of guilt or
it's
education.
Free.
It's free. And it's also like fun. It's just like fun to see the world through different perspectives and realize that like we're really all so
human.
Similar. Like we're all just human. We're all, so it's, I don't know, every time during the BLM, and it's, it's still happening all the time. It's just so heartbreaking to see these differences that should be celebrated and instead used as a form of hate. I don't know exactly what to say about it. It makes me feel helpless. It makes me feel sad. It makes me feel like I want to understand, and yet I can't. I can't understand that mentality.
I think it's just so complicated, and that's why I'm asking all my recent guests to really think a little bit about that and how we can come together across communities. So you are a creative. Have you seen some of your colleagues or other actors and singers bond and come together to come up with maybe some action items?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Hamilton, we have like a little text group called Hamilasians. It's like all the
Oh my
Asians
God,
of, like,
it's so cute.
Past and present companies, and we Zoom sometimes. I think Hamilton created a new task force to kind of deal with more social issues. And so I think AAPI Heritage Month is coming up, and I think they're planning a lot of things there. I have a lot of friends like Marcus Choi. He plays George Washington on my tour. He's been doing a lot of education about Asian American history. So there's definitely a lot in the process of happening. And I think a lot of that will definitely, especially be shown in AAPI month. I'm very excited about that.
Awesome. Yeah. How did you get through some of these challenging times? It's still challenging because we were all sheltered in place. New York had a huge outbreak, and the city was shut down. How were you able to cope with all this stuff that's going on?
Do you mean like pandemic specifically, or like,
pandemic, sociopolitical chaos? And I mean, we've been through so much as a nation, as a community. And so, wondering how you were able to deal with that and not maybe isolate or become apathetic.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think first I mourned for a long time. I just like spent a lot of time crying, honestly.
Thank you for sharing that. Yeah, people need to know it's emotional.
It's really emotional. And I think I understand why people can become apathetic. It's not even apathy as much as like, it's really hard to feel so strongly. It's really hard to like release all of that sorrow and just break down and let it consume you. So I get it, but it's not, it feels much better to release it and to cry about it and just kind of throw a little tantrum, just like let it flow through you. But kind of the way to cope with it, there's just been so many conversations. I've had so many conversations with different friends of different backgrounds, hearing how they cope with it and really relating to a lot of people. I've really gotten so close to my family during this pandemic. I think that's quite a common story, but my dad actually has lived in Korea for the last 20 years.
Oh, wow.
And his business took a huge blow because it was a Korean American exchange student program. So that's not going to happen during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And so he actually permanently moved back to America. So our whole family is together for the first time in 20 years. And there was a lot of healing to be done and it wasn't great at first. There was so many arguments. We were such a passionate family.
In Korean or in English or a mix?
Both. Definitely both. Have you seen, why am I forgetting the name? Minari. Have you seen that movie?
Yes.
Yeah, it's very like that. Like maybe a little bit more English than that, but it's called Konglish. It's like very in between. But yeah, I think what's gotten me through the pandemic has been my close relationships. I've really invested a lot of time into them. And then actually the other thing is a different creative outlet. So I've been doing a lot more songwriting and producing music, and it's related to my industry, but it's quite different. It's a whole other industry, recorded music and just music in general. And it's something I've wanted to do my whole life, but have never had the time to kind of let myself be a beginner again and know that I won't make money from it for a while I'm still like educating myself in it. And that has been like the best blessing of quarantine. I've learned so much. We're working on an EP now. It's been like so nice to hear my own voice and my own creativity happen during this time.
What genre is the album going to be in? Because you have, again, such a diverse set of skills. So how did you decide like the flavor of the songs or the themes of the album?
Yeah, it's very like, it's basically pop, but there's some elements of R&B. And actually a friend was listening to it the other day, and he was like, I don't know how to categorize your songs because every song is pretty different. Like we have one that has like a 80s kind of bop to it. We have one that's very R&B. We have one that's just like a pop ballad, maybe from like the 90s, 2000s kind of a feel. So every song's pretty different. And my man does more of like the producing side of it, more of the instrumentation. And then I like do more of the top line, the melody and the harmonies and all that. And he has such a good groove. His music is like very masculine and groovy. And then my music is very technical and clean and quite feminine. So there's this like awesome marriage between those two that comes out in the music. I'm really excited for people to hear it as well.
I'm excited. I mean, hopefully you can give us a snippet at the end of the show, because I hope people can hear your voice on this episode, even though you have like tons of YouTube videos that I watched. The 6 in 6 minutes. Tell me a little bit about that, because you were channeling Kwasa in your outfit. And was that part of your alter ego Slay?
Absolutely. That was my alter ego Slay. I love that you brought her up. So Slay is it started off as a joke. My friend who I know from King and I, my stage name is Stephanie Jae Park. And she like jokingly was like, yeah, Stephanie Slay Park. And I was like, I love that. That is so cheeky. It's so funny to just boldly call yourself Slay. Like how bold is that? And I think like, if you don't know my personality, it might come off cocky, but I really don't care. It's so not my normal self. So Slay is like my alter ego. She's like my ideal professional and artistic embodiment. She's super cheeky, and she just lets the art flow through her, and there's no questioning it. There's no like negativity allowed, especially from myself. Any kind of obstacle is actually an opportunity. And especially during 6 in 6 minutes, it's funny you say that. I was having a really bad day that day. And I had gotten some kind of bad news right before my turn. And I very specifically was like, okay, it's time for Slay. And I like, it's silly.
You slayed it. That's what it was. Like, I was like, oh my goodness, I'm seeing a Korean American Hwasa. This is amazing.
I love that so much. I actually looked up Hwasa after, because I didn't know who she was, but I was like, oh my God, what an awesome compliment. So
her voice is sick. I love it.
I love that so much.
When you're on stage as Slay, and by the way, all the greats have an alter ego. Look at Beyonce.
Yeah.
Sasha Fierce and all the celebrities who kind of are a little bit more shy. They feel like having that alter ego gives them an outlet. How do you turn Slay on and off though? Because are there overlaps? Is there any overlap sometimes?
Yeah, there's definitely some overlap. I definitely have that like cheeky sense of humor is definitely Slay. I'm a little more introverted, and Slay's definitely much more extroverted. Okay, so my sister and I worked on this too through like life coaching and whatnot, and she does this technique where like I choose a part of my body. So for me, it's my belly button, and I just like touch her, and I'm like I activate Slay, and I just like it's just a mindset change that just happens. But I will say I've never thought about turning her off, so that's actually a fun thing to kind of like process for me. I think just after the work is done, it's just like an exhale, and it's back to Stephanie. But there's definitely some overlap. I mean, Slay is like it's just me at my most confident, kind of not shameless, but most like I don't give a crap energy. Like it's just that Stephanie. Whereas I can often question myself, but Slay doesn't. So
uninhibited.
Exactly, uninhibited, free.
Yeah, no alcohol. Well,
yes,
maybe. So, you've been in a lot of different plays and projects. I saw the YouTube video with the singing a cappella group.
Oh, yeah.
How does that all come together, and how do you choose which projects you're going to be a part of?
Honestly, it's just kind of as they come, if they interest me, then I want to do it. I think a lot of it is just collaboration with people. That a cappella group, I love, love, love this group. It's this awesome group of young professionals like me. Some of them produce, some of them songwrite, and it's just like a trust in the people you want to work with. So I guess I do choose my projects, but it's more that if people who I really respect as artists want to do something, I'm all in always, every time. I'm like, yes, hell yeah, I'll do it. Let's do it.
That's amazing. And I think part of life is saying yes to these great opportunities, of course, with boundaries. But
yes.
So thinking about your upcoming EP, what plans do you have, and what are you currently working on?
Well, currently I'm working on the part of it that I am so clueless in. So if any of your listeners want to just like hit me up on my Instagram and tell me that they know how to market and social media and all that, that'd be awesome. But that's what I'm working on right now. The music is pretty much done, so it's being mixed right now, and I think the next step for us is the social media, the marketing of it, the visual part of it. I know we really want to have like a visual element, not quite a music video, but maybe a music video. But we have a great community of dancers, and I think we really want to feature some of these dancers as well. So the next step is just like lifting it off its feet and giving it to the world. And that is the part of the creative process that I need the most help in. So I think I'm just like researching how to do that right now.
Well, I don't know if you're a part of the Asian Hustle Network on Facebook. It's like 70 plus thousand Asian American entrepreneurs, business people, creatives.
Oh,
And so if you
wow.
put it out there that you need help, it's a very supportive community. And
Awesome.
I'm a part of also the Asian Podcast Network, which it's a smaller community than Asian Hustle Network, but it is this, what you're describing is this supportive group of people that will root for you and help people out when they need it. And
I love that so much. Thank you for that.
yeah, absolutely. And, aside from that Hwasa-esque music piece, I really think that you should bring out Slay and just have these amazing, amazing costumes and visuals. It's going to be,
good to know.
Yeah, I loved it. But I'm very into K-pop, so it reminds me of Chung-ah when she's so shy, at least in her interviews, and then when she dances, she's like beast mode. It's on.
Yes, I love it. Okay, good to know. Good to know.
Yeah. For those that want to go into musical theater, acting, singing, especially for an Asian American, what advice would you give them?
Yeah, I think there's so much advice I would want to give because it's the same advice I'm still trying to remind myself of every single day. The biggest thing I always say is just do not compare yourself to anyone else. There really is no such thing as competition if you really think about it in art, because me as a person is so different than you as a person. How can we be this? How can we be competing for the same thing? So I think just like really staying in your lane, don't look left and right, don't even look back, just look forward and know that everybody's journey is so specifically tailor-made to them that you really someone might be successful in their teens and someone might be successful in their 50s. There's no race. There's no correct path that you're supposed to take. So kind of celebrating someone else's success as your own success instead of counting someone's successes as your own failures, I think is really huge. And then the other thing I would say is to really, really get to know yourself on a very intimate level. I think self-awareness and self-care, it's starting to become more applauded now, but it's not generally that applauded, and it's not very fabulous. It's not very like celebrated and exciting. It's very personal, and that journey is so important to make, to confront all of these demons, because if you don't confront them, they're just going to lift weights and just go deeper in you and just come out at the worst times, so really getting to know yourself on that level, and then knowing that those very things that make you different, make you authentic, and you might even label them as weaknesses, for example, those are the things that make you special. And those are the things that make you different from someone else. That's like why people are going to want to hear from you. It's not because you're like everyone else. It's it's like those very things that you might hate about yourself is actually the thing that you should most celebrate and put out there without any kind of shame.
And, that could really make someone anxious to say that there's ambiguity and there's no straightforward path. How do you
Yeah.
deal with ambiguity as well as preparing yourself maybe for rejection? Because you're not, I mean, just by the numbers, you're not going to get every single part that you
Oh,
audition
no.
for, right? So, how do you cope with that when that happens?
Yeah, it's I can't act like it's not hard every time, like, but I think the main thing is to separate who I am from what I do. I think in other people's careers, in careers outside of like entertainment, it's kind of easier to differentiate between like maybe me as an accountant versus me as a person, whereas in like entertainment, it's hard to find the line there, but I think that is so important. Me as an artist, that is not who I am. It's an aspect of me, but who I am is my relationships with people, my personality. Like, there's just so much more to me. And every failure, which there's so many more failures than successes, no matter what, it's just, you can't get to the successes unless you fail a bunch of times.
Well, what failure sticks out in your mind where you learned a lot about yourself or maybe a lesson that came up from it?
Yeah. So for example, if I don't get a role that I really, really, really want and I think is right for me, first I am sad about it. I have to let myself go through that and just mourn the loss of the dream of it. And then I just talk to my close people and remind myself of who I am again. Like remind myself that wasn't meant for me. And I believe in God. I believe in a higher power, and so there's this like conscious surrendering of my career, of my path to God, and knowing that like the more I try to control it, the more it's just I can't. There's no way to control these things. It's not in my power. So this very active surrendering of control of my life and my career, and trusting therefore that if I don't get something, it wasn't meant for me. It was meant for someone else. And if I do get something, then this is for me, and let's freaking do this. Like, but first I'm sad about it, and then I have to kind of remind myself, who I am and why this isn't for me, and it kind of just accept it. There's just a lot of acceptance that happens with it.
Well, throughout this whole interview, you've been talking about embracing your feelings, which I think is so important because a lot of people have a lot of pent up grief.
Yes.
They haven't mourned the loss of what things used to be and what they're going through right now. And it
Hmm.
does lead to stuck energy. I liken it to a pot of boiling water, where
Hmm.
if you keep the lid on, it's going to pop off. And I tell my clients that because they might find themselves crying while they're doing laundry or the dishes, and there is underlying problem. There are underlying problems there, and
Yeah.
being able to address those would really alleviate a lot of that pressure that people go through.
Yeah, I think, vulnerability feels so difficult, and And yet, for artists, for example, vulnerability is our biggest strength, and kind of just changing your mindset about it. I think for me, I read a lot of Brene Brown, who is about the
I
power of
love
love. I
her.
love her so much. I love everybody associated with that world. There's like Cheryl Strayed, and there's just so many people who I consume their books. But knowing that like those moments that make you feel weak is actually like such a strength to kind of sit there in your grief and your tears and addressing those things. It feels so painful, and yet that's the fire that's making you strong. That's like the very thing that is healing you and giving you new muscles and letting you then move forward. Whereas it's hard and it's not glamorous and it's scary, but it's just like you said, it's the very thing that you need to like then move forward to the next step. And I personally love crying. I know it's a silly thing to say, but it feels like this like awesome release that just needs to happen. And I used to hate crying for so many reasons. You feel like a weak person when you're crying, like I feel like weak and ugly, but now I'm like, yes, I'm crying. I'm like getting rid of this feeling. It's such a good release. I feel so much better. Every time I cry, I feel so much better. It's amazing. I highly recommend it.
I'm glad you said that. Like for me, when I get like mad, I start crying because I think a lot of people internalize that it is weak and then it keeps going. But I do think it shows that you care, and you have to let it out at some point
I think
in a healthy
emotions are
way.
so strong. Absolutely. Yeah. And letting them out and letting it flow through you, it makes it happen faster too. It's like if you're going to deny yourself the thing, I think you just kind of go into a depression because you're trying so hard not to feel this thing, but it's there. It's not like it's not going to go away until you feel it, It's like the fastest way through the fire is through the fire. Just go through it.
And your sister does energy work. You are life coaching as well as obviously a successful artist. How did your parents perceive emotions, and what messages did they send you early on?
Yeah, I think my mom also perceives like anger and sadness definitely as more weakness as well. However, she was the one that first found energy work. She actually is a cancer survivor. So
Oh, wow.
during that, she found this thing called laughter therapy, which is like,
It's
oh my
so
God,
bizarre, but
it's so
it
bizarre.
works.
It works so well. And I think she really did a lot of work of like wholeness work, both in physical medicine and whatnot, but also like emotional and mental work. And she was the one that found this energy healer in Colorado. And then that's kind of what got my sister more into it. So I'm really grateful that my mom found it. She totally changed the trajectory of my family's emotional life. We're all very like big doers. We all are constantly trying to better ourselves really, really strongly. But she was the one that got us down that path for sure. And our whole family before this definitely saw crying as such a weakness and such like we felt like vainly ugly. Like we felt like we became ugly. And like that was like such a stupid thing, but that was a lot of why I avoided it. I just didn't want the puffy eyes, and already being Asian, I'm like, I don't want my eyes to be even smaller and more swollen. Like it's just it's like such silly things. But yeah, my mom we're a very emotional family as well. And I think like seeing that, I used to see it as a weakness for sure. I saw a lot of anger, I saw a lot of fights, I saw a lot of explosions, and yet now I'm really grateful for it because we don't hold anything in. You like, you can say one little comment to piss someone off accidentally, and we are going to talk about it for the next 3 hours, and we're going to get it out, and we're always back to a blank slate by the end. So yeah.
But I think that's helpful though. You're releasing the tension within the dynamics, and that's what happens and creates some negativity when you guys aren't communicating with each other, or any family.
Right, absolutely.
A lot of parents bring their child into family therapy thinking they're the problem child, and then it's like, wait, you're kind of avoiding the problems in your relationship, and all these kinds of different dynamics. So your dad moving back after 20 years of physical separation for long periods of time.
Yeah.
I mean, what was it like for you for him to come back, and what does he think about emotion?
Whew. So he started like crying watching some YouTube video in front
Oh,
of
wow.
us. This was like a couple months ago, and he was like, "Man, in my old age now, I just let it all come out." He was like, I didn't cry for decades, and nowadays I cry just watching a video." He's like, "I don't know what's happening to me." I don't know if he like necessarily thinks too much about the emotions, but I think he doesn't judge it as much as he used. I don't think he like thinks it's a weakness quite as much anymore either, which is really, really nice for the father of the house to be like crying in front of you. There's something so beautiful about that. Um, but yeah, it's he's my dad is really wonderful. It was hard to figure out how to live together again. That it was hard, and there was a lot of honest, difficult conversations happening all the time, for sure. But we made it to the other side, and it's such a happy like fairy tale storybook ending right now. It's not an ending, but for us,
Our new
like I
beginning.
we earned our peace. We earned the love that we have for each other now. We earned it through so many conversations and fights and passionate emotions all flying everywhere.
So
My boyfriend was shocked. He's like,
he's like,
"Are
what
people,
is going
this is
on
your
here? Why is
family?"
everyone fighting?
Yeah, truly. It was like, "This is crazy." I was like, "This isn't even anything yet, babe. Just wait."
So you grew up with two other sisters, and how was that process? Was there competition? And how did you learn to just accept each other for the talents and wins that each of you had?
We are definitely, so I didn't even know that we were competitive, but looking back, I'm like, oh, we were so competitive. So I'm really lucky. I feel very in between my two sisters. Like I have one that's very free spirited and chill and awesome. And then the other one is like also amazing, but much more kind of type A. She has strong boundaries, she has strong values. And I'm so in the middle there. Like I'm so right in the middle. But actually, my middle sister is super, super competitive. And I think she means it. She means it very healthily, but it kind of made my oldest sister be turned off to a lot of these things
Mm.
because my middle sister kept wanting to do the same piano pieces and wanting to be in the same classes. And I think my older sister was like, "Stop competing with me. Like I'm sick of it." So she kind of quit doing these things a little earlier. Whereas for me and my middle sister, I was like, I want to do that with you too. And she loved it. We loved playing games. We played card games like on crack all the time. We're like crazy with adrenaline all the time. We're so, so, so competitive. So
I hope you guys didn't
actually,
hurt each other like on Slapjack or anything.
oh my God. Yeah, absolutely. We would definitely like hurt each other in certain competitions, but very healthy. I feel lucky that I was very healthy with my sister, and both of my sisters support me so much. We also grew up singing so many trios and duets all the time. So I have a really incredible relationship with my sisters. I know I'm very lucky to be able to say that. But it taught me healthy competition for sure. I didn't even recognize it as competition until my adult years, and I was like, oh, that's hyper competitive. That's like very, very competitive. But it was healthy, at least between me and my middle sister. I think my middle sister and my oldest sister maybe not quite so much, but they figured it out. They're fine now. Yeah.
It's hard. It sounds like there's competition, but also that you looked up to each other. And so
Yeah, I
that
really look up to them.
there's that blurred line, and depending on how people perceived it at the time, it could
Mhm.
be a little bit murky waters. But I think it's important to know that you guys have, it sounds like, amazing bonds and love and respect for each other, especially as adults.
Absolutely. I don't know how I would be doing this career, at least for the last couple years, without my sister, without both sisters, you know. Um, and they're so my biggest fans. My family is my biggest fan, are my biggest fans by far. I like I had a couple years where I was really, really insecure and I wanted to give up, and yet my family believes in me more than I did myself. And I know that's such a huge privilege to be able to say. I know that so many other families don't necessarily support their like artist child, but I'm the opposite. And my parents just like they think I'm the best singer in the whole world. They think I have the best voice in the world, and they tell me that all the time. And I'm so lucky. I'm so, so lucky.
That's so sweet. And so I'm telling listeners, call your parents, Call your loved
Yes.
ones. I mean, if you have
Yes.
healthy relationships and can resolve whatever issues, I mean, it is magical and valuable to have people around and your loved ones that really, truly, genuinely support you.
And I will say too that for a long time, I felt like I wasn't doing enough for my parents. And like I had done a couple Broadway shows and I had a pretty good career, but I was like, this is never enough for my parents. Like I never felt like I was doing them proud. I was like making them proud. And so I had a conversation with them and I broke down and I was like, Mom, I just feel like I'm never good enough for you. Like I feel like I'll never
Mm.
achieve these goals. And she was like, Are you kidding me? You have achieved way more than I ever imagined for you. Like I'm so proud of you. You only surprise me at this point. Like I think that I had been carrying this expectation, this false expectations from my parents for like decades, and to finally talk to them and just release that and to find out that it wasn't true. It was just like my own fake thing that I put on them. It was very, very healing, and it freed me. It made me feel like I didn't have to I didn't have to be successful for them. I could just like choose the projects I want to do because I wanted to do them and not to just make them proud. So, there's a lot of misunderstandings and a lot of expectations that are probably not even based in reality and based in truth. I think the conversations are worth having.
I think what you're speaking to as well is to check things out. Well, as what we say in therapy is like you may be thinking a certain way that someone else thinks ill of you, but when you actually talk with them, it's not that. I mean, it
Right.
could be, but I think that
Right.
there's some benefit to be able to have these conversations and be open to feedback and being flexible.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, on to the happy part of your chapter, and
Yeah.
what are your dreams moving forward?
Oh gosh, I'm learning that I don't have one singular dream. So I really just want to do everything. I want to have a lot of albums of my own music out. I want to collaborate with a bunch of different singers and songwriters and musicians. I really want to originate a role in a show, in a musical or a play, and I want to be a part of the creative process. I think the biggest similarities though between all my dreams in the future is like to be the one making the opportunities for myself. I think that's kind of the biggest goal for myself, is therefore to have more control of my career instead of feeling like a pawn in someone else's game, or some kind of like a piece in someone else's machine. I want to be the one making the machine. I want to be the one with my voice behind the music, behind the words. I want there to be more. I want to represent not just for me but for Asian American women. I want more of my voice out there. I want more of people's voices like me. So there's no like singular dream for myself, but the common denominator is that I want to make the opportunities for myself. I want to be the creator as well.
That's so, so powerful. Taking your fate in your own hands and having creative control. Because there's some people that are doing these entertainment type roles for fame, which is not a bad thing. That's a valid reason. The and part is things have to be meaningful to people.
Yeah, there's this beautiful quote by Martha Graham, and a part of it says, this divine dissatisfaction that keeps us marching. And I really love that because just like Angelica Schuyler, I'm truly never satisfied. I'm like, every project I do, I just can't wait for the next one. I can't wait um, to explore some new territory. So I think like leaning into that dissatisfaction has been really rewarding for me as well.
Is there a K-pop song on the new EP? And if not, would you consider that?
I will consider that for the next round. I will definitely consider that for the next round. It's not on this one, I have to admit, but maybe the next one. Yeah.
Awesome. Well,
I love that so much.
I know it's like, who is this person telling me to do my album? But hey, I always have to sneak in. I love BTS. I'm an ARMY, so it's just
Yes.
that's part of my life. And I have been taking Korean for a couple years now.
No
so,
way. I love
but it's like a first, probably an elementary school like level, because it's really hard to learn a language as an adult. It's so difficult.
Yes. Honestly, we're probably at the same level at this point.
No, not at all. Yeah, at least you have parents to talk to, because I'm not Korean, and so I'll say words and stuff and to my kids like "먹자," because they're just so. I'm like, hurry up, eat. Yeah, 빨리. And K-dramas and stuff, but. So could you give us a sneak peek of your EP, or just like one or two lines that you can kind of give us that we can kind of get that taste before the whole album is out?
Okay. Well, then I'll sing a song that I've just sung forever. It's by Solange Knowles. Everyone knows. Okay. You're sweeter than spring. Nobody's ever been more. I know you'd give me the shirt off of your shoulders. You'd give me the world. Ooh, but I only wanted to be your woman, to give you all the things I know I can. But you can't love me. No, you can't love me if you don't even love yourself. Oh, I still want to be there, but I've got more enough and reasons to see this ain't our season. I should be leaving all these leaves dancing in the dark.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing. I thank you so much for singing that on the spot. I mean,
of course.
I loved it. And
that was like my college acapella audition song.
Good. So good. I can see how your parents think you're the best voice in the world. So,
oh, thank you.
That's amazing. Well, any other last positive message that you kind of wanted to leave listeners and viewers with?
Man, I guess just like celebrate yourself. I think there's so much grief, and there's a lot of horrible things happening in the world. So I think to maybe actively look for and embrace the joyous moments. I know like sometimes I can feel like even guilty for feeling joy in these moments, but I think that is not helpful. Just like to take joy and really embrace these little things, and celebrate what makes you different. Celebrate everything, and know, this is such a little random thing to sneak in there, but know that there's no negative emotion. Like even like sadness and anger, those are there, you can't possibly label an emotion negative. Everything is useful and helpful, and so taking all of those things and just letting it be and being really kind to yourself through it all.
I know you already have a career, but you would be an amazing acceptance and commitment therapist.
I love that. I'm so happy to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the principles that you're speaking to fit within that theoretical model. And I let clients know too, anger is not necessarily a bad thing. It can be productive.
No. Super productive.
It's just when people take it to the extreme and, are hurting other people intentionally, that's
right.
That's where it can kind of go in a different direction. But
right. Absolutely.
Well, Steph, thank you so much for being on the show. And again, shout out to Peter Stoltz for connecting us, because he's just an amazing person, friend to both of us. And I can't wait to see you perform more.
Thank you. I'm so happy to have met you, Stephanie Jae.
I know. I was like, Stephanie Jae, oh my God.
I love it.
Thank you so much for listening to the Color Success Podcast. Listen, like, subscribe on all major streaming platforms, YouTube, IG, and if you want exclusive content, you can join our Patreon. All links can be found at colorofsuccesspodcast.com.